For some anglers, carp fishing is an obsession, a way of life. For many others, it's a new area of sport fishing, just waiting to be discovered. My name's Matt Hayes, and I'm here in Ontario, Canada, to explain the simple tactics that will help you catch your first big carp. Well, thank you very much. That was fantastic. Well, this is interesting because I've actually caught this fish, or at least hooked it, on a PVA bag, and PVA is really interesting stuff. It works everywhere. I use it all the time in the UK. It's a really good way of just putting a few freebies around your hook bait and encouraging the fish to take it. And PVA works just as well here as it does at home. Here's how you tie a PVA bag up. About 25 years ago, a new product came into carp fishing that was called PVA, and it's still around today. It's one of the best things that's ever happened, and PVA is such a useful product to have in so many situations. What I should explain first of all is what it is. It was actually designed originally for surgical procedures, for stitching up wounds and things. So basically it comes in the form of either a mesh or a string, or in some cases a solid bag, but basically it dissolves in water. So if you put oil on PVA or something that's non-water based, it doesn't dissolve, but if you put it in water, it dissolves very quickly. So that enabled us to develop rigs that had little bits of PVA string and bags full of goodies attached to them that would put your hook bait right in the middle of a pile of freebies. So the idea is that basically you cast out a rig with some sort of PVA attachment, whether it's string or a bag, into the lake, and when it hits the bottom, the water will attack the PVA, causing it to dissolve. Now there are many forms of PVA. This is PVA mesh, and I've chosen this because, to my way of thinking, for a newcomer to the sport, this is by far the easiest stuff to use. There are many variants and lots of ways of actually utilising it in rigs, but I'm going to show you what I think is probably the best and the simplest way. It comes on a tube like this. You'll discover why in a moment. The first thing I'm going to do is put a knot in the end of the PVA, just a simple overhand knot like this. And then I'm going to trim off the waste. I don't need that, and I can dump it in the water because it will dissolve down there. Then I'm going to pull up the PVA stocking so that it's tight against the end. You can put anything in here as long as it's not wet with water. So you can put baits in that have been soaked in oil or in flavour, but not anything that's wet. So for example, I'm feeding quite a lot of maize out the bait bucket today, and that's a wet bait. I'd need to dry it out to use it in PVA. Most people use PVA with things like pellets. They're dry, you can drop a few in. I always like to include a bit of a scattering in my hook bait as well, so I've got some boilies here, and what I'm going to do is just crush them up and drop them into the tube along with the pellets like this. 3 boilies will be absolutely fine. And then I've got everything sitting in the bottom of the PVA in a nice neat little pile. To make it really neat when you're fishing, try and compress it down as much as you can. Just squeeze the end of the bag like this, and then chop off a decent bit. This is the way I like to do it, by the way. There are other ways. So now I've got a bag with quite a long opening at the top. That's okay. What I'm now going to do, I'll lay it there so you can see this, is I'm just going to cut that PVA down the middle until I reach where the goodies are, like that. So look, what I've got is almost like a carrier bag with two handles, and I'm just going to use an overhand knot to pull, or double overhand knot actually, to pull those two handles together and seal it up. And then I'll just chop off the waste. Again, I don't need to worry about that, it dissolves in water. And now I'll show you how you attach it to the hook. The real benefit of PVA is that wherever you're going to cast, you'll have a little pile of freebies. With this mesh, it's ever so easy. Just pass the hook through a couple of the strands of mesh, like that, twist it, and hook on one or two more. And it sits like that, with the hook bait right next to it. When it hits the water, it'll drop to the bottom, the water will attack it, the PVA will dissolve, the pellets will explode out into a little pyramid, and the hook bait will be sitting right there where the action is. No hungry carp can resist that, I'll tell you. Simple, but very, very effective. The nice thing about fishing with PVA bags is you're always fishing accurately in some ways, because you're guaranteed to have some free bait around your hook bait. It's brilliant for fish that are just browsing around an area and looking for food. Nails them virtually every time, I think. Looks like a decent fish, this one. He's got a good set of shoulders on him. Lovely boy, lovely pair of shoulders. Show them off, show them off. Look at the size of the fish's head too. Big, big mouth. You can get an orange in there. In fact, I think you could get an apple too. Huge mouths need plenty of feeding, so I could afford to be generous in the amount of bait I was introducing. But while much of it went out with a spom, I like to use a PVA bag too. I know there's nothing new or especially clever about PVA, but as a means of getting bait around your hook bait, it really does offer unrivaled accuracy. Anyway, you don't need me to tell you that. The proof is in the pudding. Yeah, it's a beautiful fish. Good 20-pounder. Caught on the PVA bag. It's just so deadly. They've been around for donkey's years now, but it's absolutely brilliant stuff. And, you know, it's caught me so many good fish. This one being no exception. Look at that. It's a real good solid lump. Beautiful carp. Just goes to show that PVA is just as effective in other parts of the world as back at home. That had a set of shoulders on it, that one. No wonder it was a good fight. This is amazing. It's just non-stop action. I've got double runs here. I've just got to leave the other rod. There's plenty of line on the reel. It'll just go and dump itself in a weed bed or something. It's amazing fishing. It's a really wild, rough day. There's waves beating on the shore behind me, and I'm standing out here on this lonely old spit, absolutely surrounded by carp that are in a feeding frenzy. I kid you not. I put the rigs out, they last about 2 minutes. It's incredible. So many fish here. Whoa. And they all fight like this. That's the mad thing. What an unforgettable experience. Workouts in gyms are less demanding. The rigs were barely in the water for more than a few minutes before I'd get a take, and every single one of those carp put up a tremendous scrap. I know double hookups aren't ideal, but they do happen from time to time, and as long as the rigs you're using are safe, the fish shouldn't come to any harm. Crazy fishing. I better go and sort the other rod out, I think. Yeah, it's as I suspected. This second fish I've picked up all the slack line and it had buried itself in the nearest weed bed, so a little bit of gentle pressure, out she came. There's a lot of weed on the fish, so it's not fighting that hard now, but it means I might get my brace. Just crazy, so windy and wild, but carp love these conditions. They feed like crazy on a big warm wind like this, whether it's in Canada or wherever you find them. I think I've had enough now. I don't keep extensive fishing records, but I know that if I did, it would probably reveal that more than 50% of the carp that I've caught in my lifetime have come within just a few rod lengths of the bank. And that actually means that whereas using 2, 3 and even 4 rods, which has become quite commonplace, has got its place sometimes, so too has the single rod. Now, my busy lifestyle doesn't allow me time to spend endless hours beaving up on the bank. So I have to fish for a few hours and try and fish as effectively as I can. And that means short range fishing with one rod, because one rod gives me mobility. It allows me to explore the lake and drop a float fish bait into lots of nice carpy looking areas. Now you might think that it's a bit of a long reach. This lake's 39,000 square acres in size, but to prove that you don't need more than one rod to catch a good carp and that it can be done on a float, that's exactly what I'm going to try and take on here on Rice Lake in Ontario. The rig I've chosen is fairly simple. Basically, the bite indication is a float like this, which is fixed onto the line with a rubber sleeve. Now, I'm going to mess around with that later on to actually get the depth correct and set the float at the right depth, but we won't worry about that here. Then I've got some weights sliding, as you can see here, on a free running swivel type ring, and then a buffer, a swivel, and then the rig, which is basically 2 grains of maize and a grain of plastic maize, which is buoyant and will neutralize the weight of the hook and make the whole rig a little bit more sensitive to any carp. So there it is, very simple. Float fixed on the line, bottom end only with a rubber, a sliding weight on a little mini boom, a stop, and then the rig below, which is tied onto a swivel. And with that simple setup, I reckon I can catch a carp here. Well, I've checked the depth now using a technique known as plumbing the depth, and if you don't know how to do it, you can find it easily online. Just Google it. But the point is that I've established that if I move the float up to level with that ring there, my bait's going to be nicely on the bottom along with the weights, and it'll fish really nicely. And casting this thing out is just a little underarm flick. Now, the area where I've baited up is really not very far out at all. And I'll show you. It's literally just out there. And I've been able to introduce that bait really quietly without the fish knowing about it. If you've baited an area and you drop a float over the top, it makes much less disturbance than a great big heavy ledger rig. And it's a very, very good way to catch fish of all sizes. Absolutely deadly. And if using 3 rods and plastering bait all over the place is a blunderbuss approach, this is the rifle shot. It's like a sniper's bullet. It's a brilliant way to do it. I just love the control of the shorter, lighter rod. It's much easier to play a carp on a rod like this than a big, powerful, traditional carp rod. Very nice carp too. How about that? Ooh, Gotcha. Oh, I'm absolutely delighted with this. It's a beautiful carp too. It's early evening now and we've got low directional light. Just look at this beautiful fish and the way the light's catching it. It's really gorgeous colours, deep chestnut almost. Really nice looking carp and a big fish to catch on a little float rod, but I told you it could be done. Don't ignore the float. And of all the ways to catch carp, I think for me, maybe it's a toss-up between this and surface fishing, but when the end result is a carp like this, then you'll know why I love it. I must admit, I really enjoy fishing big waters. And here in Canada, they don't come much bigger. There is an amazing sense of space here, that you really are just a tiny little dot on this enormous landscape. And I love fishing big lakes because it seems to me they're so moody. One minute they can be flat calm, the most inviting places in the world, just tempting you in. You know, it's almost as if they're just drawing a curtain over the surface of the lake that just reveals what's going on underneath, and everything seems perfect. And then half an hour later, you're sitting here in a big facing wind and the lake's spitting its fury at you. But I love that unpredictability. I love that sense of wildness. It's a drug, really. It's very addictive. Really nice fish, very, very clean, very lively in these conditions. The water's very well oxygenated now because of the wind, and the fish are fighting like stink, and as soon as you get them in the net, they try and get out again. Fantastic. It's going well so far. I've had 2 fish, so it's been a good start. The day's warming up, the wind's starting to die down, and I'm starting to get a little bit warm, so hopefully there's more to come. She's away. It's flying now. This one's taking just a couple of simple grains of plastic maize popped up. Couldn't be more simple than that. But the fish are on the bed of bait now and they'll be stirring it up out there, eating just about anything. Well, I've had 4 runs now and I think the fish in this mood could be wiping the bait out quite quickly, so I'm going to top up a little bit with the spot after this fish on both areas actually. Just put a little bit more bait in, keep them interested. rather wild and windy day has turned into a beautiful evening. The waves are gently lapping on the shore and the sun's going down in the west. And I've had to wind in to deliver this closing piece, because if I'd still been fishing, these alarms would still be going. It's been absolutely manic with double runs and everything. I don't know how many fish I've caught, but it's quite a few, and I've really enjoyed it. And really, it's the culmination of all of the lessons that I've taken you through. They're all basic aspects of carp fishing. There's nothing complicated about any of them, but by choosing the right tackle and learning how to cast with it accurately, and then of course to be able to bait up accurately and lay traps for the fish, we eventually come to the end result. And the end result has been
fish is on.
An incredible day's fishing, really, so hectic that it's hard to describe it. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember that wherever you're carp fishing, wherever you are in the world, it doesn't make any difference. The rigs, the tackle, the basic principles